Good morning, and welcome to The Bigger Picture, Episode 2. And this is a new feature we're doing here on Morning Newsbeat, in which Michael Sansolo and I search for business and life lessons from the movies and TV shows and theater and books and music and any place else in popular culture. And basically, the idea is inspired by our book, The Big Picture, Essential Business Lessons from the Movies, available now on Amazon.com. Call us. We'll even sign one for you. So how you doing, Michael?
Doing great, Kevin. And yes, we will sign the book for you without any hesitation.
Without any hesitation. You just have to pay postage. That's all. Anyway, today we're going to actually, it's only our second episode. We're already going to do something different than what we did last time around. We're actually going to start out with lessons from the music world. And this is your idea, so you explain why, and then tell us what musical number you're going to refer to as a business and life lesson.
And let me tell you, these two songs we're about to talk about, these are two old guys talking about songs that these artists wish we'd never heard of. But, songs do tell us a lot, and popular music tells us a lot because it talks about changes in the culture. I remember years ago, I believe it was Danny Wegman at an FMI meeting telling me that we all had to understand rap because rap said something that we didn't get. The song that recently came through to me, I was on a road trip and I happened to catch Miley Cyrus's new song, Flowers. Now, I'm not giving anything away here. I'm not a gigantic Miley Cyrus fan, never went to one of her concerts, but I do think she's pretty good. What's interesting about this song is when you compare it to what's going on in society right now. Because the song is about, and I know nothing about Miley.
First of all, what's the name of the song, man? You got to give the name.
Flowers. I'm sorry. Flowers.
And just be clear. I want to be clear about this. How many songs from the Miley Cyrus songbook do you know the titles of?
I actually had to think about this. 3.
What are the other 2?
Party in the USA, The Climb, and Flowers.
Okay. Just curious.
And I do know that she's Hannah Montana. I am schooled on this stuff. But anyhow, this song is, I believe it is after a breakup with a boyfriend, which I assume happens quite a bit to Miley Cyrus. And she, in the song, is talking about herself, that she doesn't need someone else in her life, that she can buy herself flowers, she can take herself dancing. And she goes through all these things that she can do on her own. And anyone who's following the news, if you get it here on Morning Newsbeat, you've heard repeatedly, we talk about the changes in society going on. Young people are not getting married. They're not having kids. And this song is almost an anthem to that feeling. I don't need somebody else in my life. I've got me. Now, Kevin, I know you're aware of this. The huge Chinese website, commerce site, Alibaba, actually has an annual celebration of the self, of buying gifts for ourselves. And it strikes me that what Miley Cyrus is saying is, it is okay to be on my own, to be single, to not have a family, to not have a spouse, whatever it is that used to be what people aspired to do. And I think for business, this has to make us think that the customers that we are serving today and certainly tomorrow are not the folks we served 5 or 10 years ago. We're going to be looking at a lot more single households. Kevin, you've had some pieces on Morning Newsbeat this week about the aging of the population and all the implications that has.
Yeah,
so again,
I wonder why, Michael.
I wonder why. Yeah. Why would we think of that? But I think Miley Cyrus of all people, is telling us something really valuable here, the self. And people are going to be very content, we're seeing it already, to be on their own, to living in single-person households. And it's up to retail business, as all businesses, to figure out how to best serve this new paradigm, because it is going to be the way. And Kevin, who are you listening to?
Well, I was really tempted to throw you a curveball and use a Jimmy Buffett song and establish exactly how old I am. But I decided, you had told me about the whole Miley Cyrus thing. So I figured if you're going to do Miley Cyrus, I got to do Taylor Swift. But I have to be honest, I cheated. So I reached out to my 29-year-old daughter, Allie, and I said, okay, I need help. Now, she's a big fan of the book. So she, a big fan of yours. Me, not so much. I need you to help me out. And I said, okay, I need a Taylor Swift song with a business or life lesson. and her first reaction was, you can look at every song she's done, and it's all about, the life lesson is, don't date Taylor Swift, because when you break up with her, it's a you will be eviscerated in front of millions and millions of people. But then she came up with one. I said, I need something a little bit more than that. And by the way, I'm going to come right out and say, I really like Taylor Swift. And in fact, one of, I think, the first concerts Allie ever went to, I took her to. It was a Taylor Swift concert at Madison Square Garden. I think Madison Square Garden is like too small a venue for her at this moment. And so I couldn't name many. I did the name, the titles of the songs, just,
You know what? Shake it off, dude.
Yeah, that one I know. Anyway, so the song that she came up with, she said, all you had to do was stay. And she said, because it's all about people who break up with each other, and they make assumptions. And I think that's really compelling for like any business, right? You have customers, but you can't make assumptions about the fact that what I'm doing in the relationship is enough to keep you here. That you continually have to work at the relationship, and you have a right to expect that and consumers have a right to expect that the retailer is going to continue to work to develop the relationship, right? And so you can't just assume that just because we're gone out, and we may have been going out for a while, that necessarily we're going to continue to go out. So I thought that was really, really good. And I felt really positive about the idea that I got my daughter to help me out with that one. So like I said,
I'm sure
I cheated, but I have no shame about that.
And I'm sure Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift are both appalled that the two of us are talking about them as lessons. But
yes,
what the heck?
Yes, we've just put up their aged their demographics significantly. All right, so we're going to also now we're going to do now, the goal in this is we're going to do something new and something a little older. So what's your what's your older one that you're going to talk about?
My older one, and this time I'm going to Broadway. It's a show that has been around for about 20 years. It is immensely popular. In fact, it even has a song about being popular. And the show is called Wicked. And Wicked is a marvelous show. It's the story of the Wizard of Oz. Everything you know from the movie The Wizard of Oz is actually perfectly handled in Wicked. But what you get is context. And you get a sense, and by the way, I've also read the book. It's based on a book called Wicked by a guy named Gregory Maguire. The point he is making is, what if you were told the story incorrectly? What if the person who told you the story had a bias, and everything you thought was good is bad, and everything you thought is bad is good? And so it's a marvelous show, and you see who these characters are, the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, whoever it may be, but mostly the two witches, Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, and of course the Wicked Witch of the West, who had no name in the movie, now gets a name, Elphaba. But what I think is the business lesson on this is we all get a lot of information. And what we always have to understand is information can always be biased. And so when you're getting information, you've got to be thinking, what is the context of this? Is there another side to the story? Because again, The Wizard of Oz tells us a very clean, neat story. Wicked says the story is all wrong. You heard it wrong. And in business, you cannot afford to be misled by bias. So you have to find a way of getting beyond the bias and getting to the truth. Hard to do, but it's an absolute must. And where did you go for something old? Now we're more in our million.
Really old. I'm going to a TV show. And I think I may have mentioned this at Morning Newsbeat at various times. When I was growing up, one of my favorite TV shows was a series called Mannix. You're shaking your head, but there's a business lesson here. And the business lesson has nothing to do with the fact that it was a detective TV series. The lesson has to do with you can't always assume that that people are not going to be able to see behind the curtain. That's actually there's a Wicked thing too. Just because you're portraying it a certain way. And here's the reason. So on Mannix, that was a late 60s, early 70s TV show. And I've got the whole series on DVD. God help me. And I've over the years, I'll occasionally throw out the DVD to watch something. But back in the day when they were doing series like that, they would do all these episodes, right? But maybe the show would get rerun once, right? But you were watching it on a relatively small television. But what happens is if when you're watching it on DVD, you notice things that they didn't think anybody was going to notice. Like there'll be a car chase. And at one point, Joe Maddox, the detective, he'll be driving like a 68 Dart. And then suddenly it changes and it's like a 69 Dart. And then, right. And these things happen. I remember there's one actual episode where whoever was doing continuity on this show, just should have been fired, because he's in the hallway and he's wearing one of his plaid sport coats, and he kicks in the door and he's going to go into his apartment and there's a fight. But when he comes through the door on the other side, he's wearing a tweed sport coat. Has the fight, and then when he leaves the apartment, he's back in the plaid sport coat. And it's like people didn't pay attention, and I'm sure somebody looked at it and said, nobody's ever going to notice. This is going to go by so fast, nobody's ever going to notice. What are the odds that they're going to be able to, they can't stop it, right? And they're not going to see it on, 68-inch screen televisions in high def. Nobody's ever going to know. And I think it's a really important business lesson to never assume that nobody's ever going to know, right? It's important to do things for the right things, and it's important to do things right. For lots of reasons, not the least of which is we live in a transparent world. And if you do things wrong and you think you're not going to get away with it, you're probably not. And I think that's a good lesson to go forward. So that's my oldie, going back a long, long time.
That was way more than my 20 years.
So we're going to add a little something new, right? Because this is episode 2. And we said last week, and I'll say it again, if you have a business lesson you'd like to share with us from a movie, a TV show, whatever it happens to be, send it along and we'll do it. We got some email that offered us some suggestions. So Michael, you got the first one.
Let me put on the glasses so I can actually read what was sent to me. This one came from Dave Henry, a good friend, used to be just a fabulous advertising guy for a bunch of different retailers. He's now in retirement. The movie he suggested is 3 Days of the Condor, which probably is about as old as the Mannix show you just referenced. A very clever, well put together movie. And I'm not going to do the whole plot, but it involves a CIA agent who suddenly, and he's not like he's not James Bond. He's an analyst.
He's an analyst.
He's an analyst, and suddenly he has 72 hours to try to solve an enormous crime. And as Dave said, what he thinks businesses can take from this is circumstances are constantly changing. The unexpected is constantly happening. And what we have to do in business is understand there is no plan going forward. That much as the main character in this movie, who's played by a fairly young Robert Redford, we have to be reacting, being proactive, and being nimble so that we can change. The other point Dave makes, which is also fascinating, is because Robert Redford is not a spy, he's an analyst. And as he is trying to solve the case, the fact that he's not a professional, that he's an amateur, makes him very unpredictable. And so the folks who are actually trying to silence him by killing him have trouble reacting to him because he's unpredictable. They don't know that he doesn't know anything, so his moves are all a surprise. And as Dave said, and I think this is a great line, an apparent weakness can become a strength. And, Kevin, you and I talk about this all the time. You've got folks working in your companies who might be the least senior people. They have different perspectives. They have different ideas. And sometimes it's those folks who don't know how you've always done things who can give you the ability to do some great stuff. So thanks to Dave Henry, and the movie is 3 Days of the Condor. And if you have it on DVD, Kevin apparently has a player for you.
I'm telling you, this is one of that is like 1976, 1977. It is one of the best thrillers of that time. It's a terrific, terrific movie. And in some ways, he's like the character Joe Turner that Redford plays is almost a precursor to the Jack Ryan character in who's also an analyst who works his way up in the CIA. Really, really good movie. People should watch it. Okay. Well, Dave lives in the United States.
He lives in Florida. Yeah.
Mine comes from Italy. So Beatrice Orlandini, an old friend of Morning News Beats. I've known Beatrice for a long time. You've known her for a long time. And she wrote in, she's in Italy, and she said, I quote, "I've always thought that Sleeping Beauty, be it the fairy tale, Disney version, or any other, offers a very powerful lesson in life. You can do just about anything to avoid a problem, a danger, whatever it, or an undesired situation. But if it's meant to be, it's going to take place whether you like it or not. So you might as well be prepared."
Great lesson.
I had never thought of Sleeping Beauty in those terms.
But Kevin, it demonstrates something. You and I, obviously, we wrote the book about it, and we talk about this. Lessons come from every place. And Sleeping Beauty, God knows, is not a new movie. It is ostensibly a kid's movie, but that's a fabulous lesson, because in that story, they do everything possible to keep her from the outcome they're afraid of. And of course, that outcome is exactly what happens. And so you cannot foolproof yourself. You cannot possibly, you can't wrap yourself in bubble wrap as a business and say these issues will not happen. Stuff's always going to happen.
Yeah. There's a line from General Karl von Clausewitz, who wrote a book in 1832 called On War. Haven't read it, but I haven't read it, not in the original German and not in the translation. But in the Spencer novels by Robert B. Parker, he is fond of quoting from that book. And the line that is so great, and it ties into what Beatrice is saying, is prepare for what the enemy can do, not what he might do. Mm-hmm. Right? If it's always better to be prepared for what can happen as opposed to what you think might happen. It totally makes sense. Because if you're wrong, you're screwed.
Well, I think we have to say grazie to Beatrice. And a big thanks to Dave. And of course, as you said, the last time we did one of these, we welcome submissions from other Morning Newsbeat viewers, readers. Tell us what movies, because I know after we came out with the book, we heard from folks who said, I have this movie I always quote. And we were fascinated by some of the examples that came back. It wasn't all The Godfather or Moneyball. Sometimes it was movies we never anticipated.
It was always fun. And I don't know if you did this or not, but when I'd do an event and I was signing books right after I gave a speech or something like that. And what I would usually say when people handed me the book is I'd say, okay, what's your favorite movie? Thinking to myself that I could actually come up with a line, come up with a line from the movie that I would be able to use. And when I
did the exact same,
and I could do it about 50 to 60% of the time. Sometimes I have to, they'd say something, I say, I don't know that movie. You're going to have to explain it to me. And I'd come up with something more generic, but it was always fun. And people almost everybody has like a favorite movie. It's very rare you say to somebody, what's your favorite movie? And people don't have one. Mm-hmm. That they do. And at the end of the day, it's the power of telling stories. Right. That's at the end of the day is the thing we're trying to talk about here. Okay. So that's that for episode 2. We'll be back with episode 3 in a few weeks. Michael, great to see you.
Kevin, good to see you. And God knows how old we'll get for the next one.
I'll try and pull like a Humphrey Bogart movie from the 30s.
Right, Buster Keaton is still out there. We can go.
I love Buster Keaton. That's one of the great debates. I know, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. One of the great debates, it was when I went to film school. So I went, I didn't go to business school. I went to film school. And there was, I remember a class where you basically, the class that I took, it's amazing, I got credit for this. And the whole thing was a discussion of Charlie Chaplin versus Buster Keaton. Who was better? And I always thought Buster Keaton was better than Charlie Chaplin, but that's just me. Anyway, that's it for this week. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you in a few weeks.